Jumping right into this, we're going to show you what we're after here. So this is a fun little model of Wall-E. Those of you that are fans of Wall-E or have small kids, you'll recognize this guy. And this is going to be an interactive assembly instruction set. So if I hit the play button here, what you're going to see is a virtual workbench. And Wall-E has been taken apart. And what we're going to see on the screen is that one of the parts is going to be sitting and just blinking, indicating that that is the part that it has the assembly step that's ready for it. So you'll notice that we won't need any instructions as far as labels and text and verbiage and that sort of thing. And I'll try to maintain, I'll try to go through this fairly slowly. I'm not sure how the video is going to come across during this GoToWebinar, so I'll try to keep that in mind. But you will see that text is optional. So we had some labels that we placed in there. I call those special effects. And what this does is allows us to keep track with our real workbench. So if we were really going to put Wall-E together here, we would have these parts on our workbench in real life, and we would have a certain way that these things are supposed to be put together. So what this is good for is if you have customers internally or externally where you're trying to describe this is how we're going to put Wall-E together. This is something that an output that you could produce right out of Composer and have that ready for whoever that audience is. And that is an important part of this is what is your, or who is your audience, who you're trying to communicate with. 3D VF Composer is a communication tool, and it's not taking CAD models and changing them, but we're actually taking the CAD models and creating documentation. In this case, it's an interactive assembly set. And one of the great things about this assembly set, and I'll kind of click through this a little bit more quickly, this next section, hopefully you're getting the hang of this, is that at any time we can, wait for the video to catch up here a little bit, we can rotate this model around. So this is not just an AVI file that's kind of hitting the play and pause buttons, but if I rotate this model around, this is something the end user could do. They need to see the back side of this. You'll see later in the demonstration that you'll be able to move forward and backwards in the animation. I need to see a particular step over again. It's going to sit and wait for us to do the next step. So here when I'm ready, I'll go ahead and click on the head. I'll put him back in play. We've got the little cooler that sits on the back, and that's the last step. Now we've got some additional things here. We call that the digger. You can see his buddy Hal sitting inside the lunchbox, and then we can create some compound animations here to see Hal crawl out and up on his arm. So again, if that's not coming through on the webinar, I apologize for that. We'll have a link where you can download all of this information after the presentation, and when you play it on your local machine, it'll have better results. The next thing we want to look at is here's our second demonstration animation, and what this is going to show is, if it comes across, the animation of this particular excavator. And my audience view screen does not actually show this on the screen, so I don't know if you can see that or not, but hopefully when we show this in Composer, it will come across. Just a couple of notes here. I got these models, Wall-E and this little excavator, off of 3dcontentcentral.com, so I want to make sure I give those guys credit. If you're not using that, it's a great place to find resources, not only for stuff for presentations like this that are a little bit more on the fun side, but they have real data out there, and it's free to download. So I would encourage you to go check that out. Our agenda, as far as what we want to try and cover, is we'll just talk about animation preparation and the workflow, and then we'll do a demo or a hands-on and show you all the steps. So we're not going to cover a great deal on how to get data into Composer or what we're going to do with the output. We'll cover that briefly, but the main stuff is in the middle, creating these animations. All right, in terms of animation preparation, a few questions you want to ask. Why do you want to do an animation? As I mentioned, this is a communication tool, so why is it that we want to communicate with people? What's important? What do we need to focus on? We're going to have to keep these things in mind as we create the animation. How much detail do we need and that sort of thing. Where can I use this? I showed you one place already, and that's embedded inside of a PowerPoint presentation. So we'll cover off on some other areas where you can use this, your output, use this animation. And then finally, we're going to spend the bulk of our time on how do you do this? How do you create these interactive animations? So the first question, why do you want an animation? We're going to cover these 3 bullets mainly. There are other things, but assembly instructions. This could be, again, for an internal customer that you're trying to show someone on the shop floor how to assemble something, or it could be, you know, the end user or the consumer. You post this on your website, and they have that there, and they have a way to interact with the model in 3 dimensions versus just some paper or some static 2D images. You just want to show how the product's used. You want to do a walkthrough or a product highlight. The excavator hopefully will be able to show you some of those functionalities. So those are the main reasons. There may be other things like maintenance and cleaning and that sort of thing. What's important to you? How do I need to position the model? What does it need to look like? How detailed does it need to be? So we're going to keep those in mind as we create, you know, our camera views and how the camera is pointing at the model. And do I need user interaction? Showing Wall-E in the first part there, I wanted to be able to allow the user to walk through at their pace. So we had that level of interaction. The excavator model is just basically an AVI, and it played, and you can stop and rewind and that sort of thing, but has a limited amount of interaction. Where can you use it? The Composer Player is something that comes with Composer. It is a free download. It's a bit like if you think of the Adobe Reader. You download that one time, install it on your computer, and then you can view, in the case of Adobe files, PDF files. Composer Player is similar. You download it one time, and then you can view Composer files. So that could be something that people could use to download your interactive animations. We can create AVI files. That's a fairly straightforward process, and then that can be played on any computer. And as you saw, we can embed the Composer Player inside of PowerPoint. We can also embed that in Word and Microsoft Word and a PDF document. And then finally, there's some options for HTML publishing, and I'll briefly touch on those if we have enough time. Here's the workflow. We want to talk about how you do this. These are the basic steps. You would import your geometry from your CAD system, create your views, place those views in the animation time bar, and then output the animation. We're going to spend the bulk of our time on the third bullet, but we'll spend a bit of time on the second one, creating views. So if you're new to Composer, this should be good to learn a bunch of stuff. And if you're a Composer user already, hopefully we'll teach you a few things about how to create these types of animations. So if we talk about importing the CAD model, we've got a slide here showing you basically when you do a file open, you're going to go out and read in my case, the SOLIDWORKS files, but the top 3 check marks are the important ones for SOLIDWORKS. We want to merge file into one actor per part. Composer calls parts actors. Actors can also be collaborative, can be arrows and things like that. But if you don't check that, it will actually bring in each part as a sort of a sub-assembly. And so there's an extra layer in there that you don't need, so you want to make sure that's checked. You can decide if you want your instance names brought in. And then the third one is import meta properties. These are the SOLIDWORKS custom properties that you may be familiar with. You can bring those across as well. Once you have your CAD inside of Composer, your CAD model, we're going to start building views. And views are simply snapshots of the actors. And we're going to use them to storyboard our animations. So this is the way that I've chosen to approach this presentation. For me, it's easier to kind of see, easier to control and keep track of what's going on. But views control or record the non-neutral properties of geometry and collaborative actors. So those are just the non-default properties. When you read the CAD file in, all those defaults are set, and then we can return to those, or we can make changes related to those defaults, or even change the default. So it's going to record camera orientation, zoom scale, visibility, and digger position. We'll talk about the digger in a minute. Once we've got some views, we're going to then drag those into the timeline. It's going to be at the bottom of the screen. This is what it looks like, so we want to review what all is going on here so that you're prepared when you see the demonstration. The first one is the time bar. That's the big red bar, vertical bar there in the middle. And we're going to move that to a particular time point and make changes to our model. So it's a bit like think of it as a claymation, if you're familiar with that, where we move it to a particular point in time, we make changes to our model, we record keys, we move it to the next time, make some changes, record keys, and so on, and then Composer interpolates between those keys to produce the animation. So we've got an area to capture and store all those keys, control all the characteristics and things of whatever's going on with the actor at that moment. And then the toolbar itself is where we're going to be able to control how that's being played back and how the keys are being captured. So let's dig into that a little bit. In terms of recording those keys, we have a screen here. There it goes. To record the keys, there's an auto key function that anytime you make a change to the position of the part or component or actor, it will automatically record that key or overwrite whatever key is there. There's a function to set keys, specifically something related to a property or a location, and we can use that in conjunction with filters that we'll talk about in a second. Then there's specific keys for location, the camera, and the digger, and those will record keys for those things respectively. There's also a drop down here for effects. We can quickly fade things in and out. It's just a quick way to be able to help us do that. You'll see all those in use during the demonstration. And then finally, 5, 6, and 7 are the 3 rows that are going across there, basically keeping track of. You got a row for actors, recording position and properties of the actors. Then we have a row for the camera. So we have camera keys, and then we have digger keys. We talk for a minute about filters, markers, and playback. The filters allow us to filter down particular keys. Maybe I want to see the keys for selected actors, or maybe I just want to see keys for particular properties such as color or transparency. Or maybe I want to see location keys for maybe a selected actor. So you could use these in conjunction. You select a bunch of actors, so I only want to see the keys related to those actors, and then I only want to see the location keys. So that's going to be helpful to determine what exactly you are changing or what's being controlled inside of those keys. They're kind of layered on top of each other. The markers, that's number 9. That's important parts, important times during the animation, and those will be generated automatically when we drag and drop our views down into the timeline. And then finally, the playback. There's standard controls there. I think are pretty self-explanatory, except for the one on the right end, which is the camera play mode. That allows us to turn the camera changes off, and that can be quite helpful at times to be able to see what's going on with the model without the camera changing position. All right, moving forward, events is what we want to discuss next briefly. And events are really where the magic happens with regard to making an interactive animation, that WALL-E animation that we saw. We're going to see this when we play this animation in the Composer player. And the way that you do this is you insert a pulse event, and that's what causes the blinking that you saw on Wall-E. So it pulses. You can make it a particular color if you want. And then you tell it what you want to do, because it pauses. That is what causes the animation to pause. And then you tell it, I want to play either, you can see the list there in the center of the screen. You can actually have it go to another file. You can link it to a website or FTP site, another view in the animation, and that sort of thing. So there's lots of options there. But this is where we're going to insert that interactivity. Next is collaborative actors. And collaborative actors are what I like to call special effects. So we have arrows, we have those labels that we saw on the Wall-E. There are 2D images that we could input. There are measurements we could take. There are cutting planes. So we're just going to touch on these briefly, and these are things that can be linked to a particular actor or a particular property, and you'll see some of that during the demonstration. Next is the digger, and this is a special tool that is, I think, unique to Composer in that it allows you to see down inside or dig down inside of your assembly. So during our Wall-E animation, we saw that his buddy Hal is actually inside his lunchbox there, the little cooler he's got on his back. And the digger allows us to see that and highlight that. And it's got different modes that we can take advantage of. The one you're seeing on the screen there is what's called the X-ray mode, and there's a couple others that I'll show to you. But this is something we can animate as well and have show up at different parts of our animation. When we switch gears and show you the excavator model, we'll then talk about the kinematics. Kinematics are links between actors, and there's 4 different types inside a Composer. There's a pivot, a spherical, a linear, and a rigid. The thing about that assembly, when you bring yours in from SolidWorks or your CAD model, all those mates and relationships that you had created in the CAD model are not brought over into Composer. So if you wanted to create some of those links, you would have to do that again inside of Composer. It's not a requirement. It's something that's optional, but we're going to show you how to do that during this demonstration here and why that might be useful. And then finally, there's some new functionality with cameras that we're going to show you that was introduced in V6R 2012X. And cameras are, as we mentioned before, used to control orientation and zoom, and there are different ways to create those camera keys. You can do that manually. When we drag and drop views, that'll create a camera key. And then we can tweak the position of the camera and the target of the camera, and we'll see all of those during the demonstration. And then there's, I'll make note of the animation path. I don't know if I have time to get to this, but in terms of what you want the camera to do as it changes position, we can have it move in a straight line or a smooth line or have some custom way that it transitions between points. One more note on output. Again, we're going to be able to look at these Composer files in the free Composer player. Anybody in the world can download that for free. We can create AVIs. A little note here about using the Microsoft Movie Maker to convert an AVI to a WMV file and significantly reduce the file size. In preparation for this presentation, I had an AVI file that I had created, and it was 850 megabytes, which is basically useless because it's just so large. I ran it through Microsoft Movie Maker and converted it to a WMV without any noticeable loss in fidelity, and the file size was 2.5 megs. So an extremely useful little tool there, and that would work on any AVI file, I should think. So that's something you could use in other areas as well. And then there's the embed in Word, PowerPoint, and PDF. You saw that. I'm really not going to touch on that, but and then we can also publish to HTML. Okay, so let me know if you have any questions. Use your your webinar little tool off to the side. I'll try to monitor that if you have questions, and maybe I'll try to hit those at the end. But again, if you want to download this presentation, all the material, there's the website, and there's also my contact information if you wanted to contact me directly. Okay. So without any further ado, let's go into Composer, and we'll fire that guy up and start in on our WALL-E model. All right, so let's open him up. And what I'm going to do throughout this presentation is I've got this model saved in different stages, so as to not have a limited amount of time here. So I don't want to spend too much time on repetitive things. So when I read in the file, and all it is a file open. In this case, I'm reading in a Composer file, but here are all the options that you would set, and if you were going to read in it your assembly, this is how you would do that. One thing I like to do right away when I read something in is to create a view, and you'll see the views populated here off to the left. That way, if I ever need to return back to that view for whatever reason, I've got it stored there. The next thing I'm going to do is start making changes. So one of the things is maybe I want to see my construction edges. So shaded with edges mode. I want to turn off the ground, and then I actually want to create my little workbench. So you can create some extremely basic shapes in Composer, and so that's what we'll do here, and we'll give it a size, and this will be the workbench that you saw during the animation at the beginning of the presentation. So we'll just position this so that it kind of looks like it's at the feet of our WALL-E model there. And we'll begin to manipulate the view and get the view looking like we want it. And we'll go ahead and we're going to set the neutral properties for the floor, our workbench here. And that's, you'll see me go to this properties window in the lower left-hand part of the screen quite often. And this is where we'll change properties, but we can also set things as neutral properties or default properties here. So WALL-E is put together. So the way we're going to do this is basically go backwards. So maybe I want to create a view here of them completely put together. And then I'm going to start selecting things like I want the cooler and house inside of there, and use some of the tools here to align or move that cooler so that it sits on the ground. So basically going to say move the bottom of the cooler to be on the bottom of, or the top of our workbench there. So the thing about Composer is that it doesn't necessarily have to be precise. It just has to look good, right? Where it's a communication tool. That's one of the things I like about Composer as opposed to your CAD model, where in the CAD model you're concerned about being very precise and tolerances and that sort of thing. In Composer we're just trying to communicate, so we can let go of some of that. The next thing we want to do is we just kind of wash, rinse, and repeat here. So we're going to disassemble WALL-E, make a view, and then at the end we'll put those views in our animation timeline and play those in reverse. One little tidbit along the way here is that I've been selecting things as components. I can actually make selections with regard to assembly. So if I make a selection with assembly mode turned on, that is selecting that head subassembly. And the nice thing about that is that it only creates a key for that subassembly in this case. Otherwise, if I selected those components individually, it would create multiple keys for one for each component. And that the more keys you have in general, basically makes your model bigger. So as I capture the location and the keys along with it, if I can cut down on some of those keys being generated, that's going to be good news. So you want to take advantage of the fact that you can select keys based on the assembly level. So let's select just the head subassembly and the floor, and we're going to show those and hide everything else. Let's try that again. So let's select this guy and the floor, and we'll show that and hide everything else. All right, well, it's not wanting to cooperate, so we will continue on without that. It's a good thing I've got this saved in different stages, but the point here is to just begin to show how you can start making your disassembly. So I'm just going to take this and move it to where I think is a good spot, and I'm going to create a view. So we'll take one of the eyes off, we'll grab the other eye, we'll move it over. We want to rotate it around a little bit, like so, and we'll create a view. Okay, and so this process would continue until you had all the views that you wanted. So what I'm going to do is fast forward to that, to where I've got all the views created. And so I'm just opening up the same model, but now you can see that I've got quite a few views listed here in my Views tab, all the way down to where I've got them fully disassembled. So this would be the point where you're basically ready to start your animation to show how you want to reassemble them. So we'll switch over to the animation mode, and animation mode is not necessarily tied directly to what's going on with the views. So we'll drag and drop those into, there we go, into the timeline. So literally just grab the view, drag it, and drop it into the assembly timeline, and I'll put it at about 1 second intervals. So each time I do this, it is capturing camera views, position of actors, and anything else related to what the actors look like. So I'll drag and drop a few of these in here, and then we'll see what we end up with. Maybe one or two more. That's probably good right there. All right, so now we're in animation mode, and we'll rewind to the beginning, and we'll hit the play button, and hopefully that comes across. We're moving a little bit slower than normal, but you get the sense that it's just taken and interpolating between the different views here. So it gets us, for the most part, about 75–80% to where we want to be. So some of these things may not assemble exactly the way we want, and that's the next piece that we want to show. And we're going to begin adjusting these views. So this is where our filters are going to come into play. So if I take this body and move it back and forth, what I would rather have it do is come up, across, and then down in between these tracks. So I'll select the body just by clicking on it in my screen here, and I'll also select the little door that goes along with it. All right, and now I've got all these keys shown down here. I can use my filter to say only show me the keys related to whatever I've got selected. So wait for the video to catch up here. So as soon as I select that filter, you see that some of the keys go away. Well, not only that, but I'm only interested in the location keys. So I'm going to also select that filter. So now my keys down at the bottom are filtered down even further. And what I'm going to do then is use my control button and just copy some of these, the position keys from their current positions, one forward and one backward. And what this will allow me to do, you'll see that when I move back and forth between these two first keys, the body doesn't move at all. Well, with the timeline set at the position of the first, or actually the second key, I am going to make a translation. So this will overwrite the key that's currently there, and so we'll drag that up a bit. With the webinar here, the response is really quite slow, so probably works good for you. That way I don't move too quickly. So now that second key, I've got it set, its position set. Let's go over to the third key, and here I want to also overwrite the key that's currently in place. And so we'll just drag that up in the Y direction. There we go. And now when we go back to the timeline, we'll drag that forward and backwards. And you'll see that we have the up and over motion that we wanted. So I'll try and make sure that you can see that. It's a little jumpy, but it starts out at its position. First, it moves up. So that's what that first key is now doing, just straight up in the air. Move over to the third key. It's going to move across. And then the fourth key, we'll position it down in between the tracks. Okay, so we're going to do that same process, but we're going to move forward in the animation here and get to where our hand is starting to be assembled. All right, so we'll take a look at the thumb, if you will, and as we drag it into place, it looks like that's a pretty straightforward motion, so we'll leave that in the way it is. These two fingers, however, are not the case. So what we'll do is we'll select the one of the fingers here, the one that's getting ready to move, and we'll go through that same process of copying those keys around so that we can create the desired motion that we want. So we make our selections, we've got our filters on, still on. So now the keys down here are representing only the location keys for the actors that I have selected. And if I grab my time bar and I try and slide it back and forth, you'll see kind of the motion now is being described. And so what I'm going to do again is just hold my control key down. I'm going to grab the first key related to that, drag it about halfway. Okay, so now between 4 and 4.5 seconds, there's no motion occurring until I come out here and use my triad to actually overwrite that key at 4.5 seconds. So we actually want the finger to be out here so that it moves kind of in an orthogonal direction. Like so. So now when I drag my time bar back and forth, we'll see the finger move forward along the x-axis, and then from 4.5 to 5, we'll see it move along the z-axis and assemble into place. Okay, so let's see if this animation will show. So we back up to the beginning and let it play real quick. We'll see the difference here. So the body's going to move up and over. Again, I apologize if the video is kind of choppy. Download this from our website and play it on your local machine, or contact me directly and I can give you further a one-on-one kind of demonstration. But so here, what we would do is put this into play and be able to have these different positions defined and make these adjustments to the positions until we get it to the place that we want. So I'm going to jump to where we've got all these positions adjusted like we like. And I'm going to close down some of these windows here to see if that will help performance here a little bit. All right, so let's we've got all of our positions adjusted the way we like. We'll hit the play button here, let it run through a little ways so you can see what's going on. So here we start out with Wally in his fully assembled position. Hit the play button and he disassembles, and then we start to see how the pieces are going to come together. So this is be more like just an AVI file playing through the different operations or the things that would be required to assemble this guy back together. So we'll see our thumb be assembled, and then next would be the fingers, the wrist pin, and so forth. So at this point, we're feeling pretty good about how this is playing through. Now we're ready to add the interactive elements. So I'll let this go just a couple more steps here so you get the idea. Got a compound motion on the little arm subassembly here that's going to not only have it move, but look like it's being screwed into the arm at the same time. So that is something that we can do as well. So let's pause that and rewind back to the beginning, back to where the first step is, where we're fully disassembled and the body is getting ready to be moved. So again, we'll select the body and the little front hatch there, and this is where we're going to define the pulse event. So down in the lower left-hand corner is where we find that in the property manager, and it offers us 2, 4, 800 millisecond pulses, and we can come in here and make it a different color blink if we want. And then in the link row, all the way to the right hand side, there's 3 little buttons, maybe hard to see on the screen, but this is what we're going to tell it to do. Now that it's stopped, what do you want to do next? And then this is the screen that we showed in the PowerPoint. So do I want to actually have it link and go to another file, to a website, to an FTP site somewhere? In this case, I wanted to just play something else that's inside of this model, and in our case, we're going to have it play the current position. So I just want you to sit there and blink, basically, like we saw at the very beginning. And then the next thing is that we're going to go to the next part of our assembly, or basically the next step, where it changes position, and then we're going to apply that same thing to the little thumb. So again, you pick the items or the actors that you want to apply the pulse event to. Come down to the property manager, select pulse. What do you want to link it to? I want it to play, and I just want to play the current position. So here's all the markers that were dropped. As we dragged and dropped things in, you can see that down at the bottom there. So you could actually have it fast forward or do all kinds of things. In our case, we just want to blink. So I'll just do a couple of these just to save time. Let's rewind. And so now you're going to want to test it out. If I hit the play button here, what it'll do, we're still in what's called design mode. So you won't see any change necessarily. You won't see that pulse activate, right? So you want to make sure that, let's go ahead and stop it rewind it again. In the lower right-hand corner of the screen is an icon where you can turn design mode on and off. So we'll turn that off, and now when we hit the play button, this will simulate playing this animation in the Composer player. So we're still inside the Composer authoring tool, but we're simulating what an end user might see if they were playing this in the free Composer player. So when it gets to the pulse event for the body and little front hatch, it's going to stop the animation, and it's just going to sit and blink. And the only instruction then you need is to click on the thing that's blinking. So that's pretty easy. So this then shows the proper assembly position of the body. And then we're going to move forward. It's going to change the zoom and focus in on the thumb. And we're ready to, it's going to sit and wait for us. So as you think about your assembly processes, you could say, well, in real life, that might take me a bit of time to do this assembly. There might be several bolts and things involved. So your animation over here is going to sit and wait for you. It's just going to sit and blink. And when you're ready to assemble the next piece, then you're ready to see the instructions. You click on the thing that's blinking. So this is one of my favorite things inside a Composer, be able to utilize. So you click the thing that's blinking, it moves forward, and you go from there. So that's just a couple of examples there. Let me close, or actually open the next model where I've got all the events added. And fast forward. So hopefully you get the idea and see the magic behind where that interactivity is added to the model. Basically adding the pulse event and then telling it what you want to do after it's paused. So here we'll briefly touch on adding some labels. So we'll move forward in the animation to where the hand is basically getting ready to be assembled. We'll go to the Author tab at the top of the screen, and we'll apply labels to these components. And what you'll see is that my default setting is basically set to grab whatever the actor is named in Composer and put that into the label. But those are things, a lot of things we can change here. We'll kind of hit that real quick. First thing we might want to do is increase the size so we can actually read it, so let's do that. And then we're going to set that as a neutral property. So what we're going to see in a second is that Composer has already faded these in at the timeline position that we're at. And I don't want this to fade in from a small text to a large text, so I want this text to be the default so that it will always show this size. Another thing you can do is, what do I want this text to be attached to? So in this case, we have it attached to the name of the actor, and that was read in when all the CAD geometry was read in. And then I want to instead have it attached to the component name or the meta property for SOLIDWORKS. So that will just change the appearance slightly, but that's how you can attach these things to custom properties that you read over from SOLIDWORKS. And there are other things here too, like you can change the attachment type, and we'll see that as I drag the timeline back and forth, if I drag it to the left, it's automatically filtered those so that it fades in as it plays. What it doesn't do is filter it back out or fade it back out. So that's where our fade out comes into play here. So I've still got all the labels selected, and it's got a nice fade out tool here. So actually I should have moved that forward. Let me undo that. Get those back. Again, I apologize for the delay, but basically you would want to move those forward to the point where, actually I didn't want those to fade out until a little bit after 4 seconds. So I'll try and show that on the next file that I open. And then you can also do things like if we want to move forward here to where the hand is going to be screwed into the sleeve. So as it moves up, like so, maybe I want an arrow to show up over here, a circular arrow, have that attached to this actor, and then we can start making changes. Like I want to make it bigger. I'd like to see change the transparency. Maybe the angle is a bit too large. Maybe I want it to point the other direction. And so we see that come into play here. And some of the neutral properties, I'll go ahead and set the angle and the size and different things. And then I'll move it forward. So it's going to move with the actor it's attached to. And maybe I want to have it fade out by the time it hits 12 seconds. So here's where I'll hit the fade out button. And here you'll see on this one where it fades in and then it fades right back out. So a quick way to do that. All right, let's fast forward to where we've got all the labels added and try and show you a couple things on the digger. Running short on time here. I want to get to some of the kinematics if I can. So I'll briefly run through this. So we've got everything run here basically to where we like it. If I hit the space bar here, that's going to activate the digger, hopefully. There we go. And the digger is the tool that we're going to use to x-ray, if you will, down into Wally's lunchbox here, and you can see that his buddy Hal is sitting inside of there. And we can animate the digger as well. So let's do that. So what we do is move it forward, our timeline forward. Let's reposition that. Let's hit a camera key, so that's locked in. And what we want to do then is actually turn on the digger at this point. But what we're going to do is have it animate from being really small. So we'll set it to not do anything but just show up. We'll set a digger key, move our timeline forward. We'll expand the digger out. Let's turn on X-ray and set the center of focus so we can see Wally, or see Hal. And to where we can see him there, we'll set another digger key. And then we're going to let that sit for 3 seconds. Set another digger key. When we move forward, we want it to actually reduce in size and disappear altogether. Another digger key, and so on. So if we go back to that and just let that play through, so the animator or the digger shows up, sits for a couple of seconds, and then goes away. So then the last one here, we'll hit that real quick to show you all the other things. So this is the end of the animation. We'll back it up to where, right before we applied all these, let it play. So we can actually do this, have a label show up as well. So again, that may be a bit choppy as you're looking at it, but also had little Hal jump out of the toolbox and crawl up his arm, and have a compound motion there as well. So these are some things that you can do inside of Composer. So got about 10 minutes left, so I'm going to close Wall-E down here and open up the excavator and try to get through some of the kinematics here before we run out of time. So let's open up. Let's go to that model. And in terms of what we're doing inside of here, we're going to switch gears and talk about kinematics. So all those assembly relationships that were done in SOLIDWORKS are now gone, so we're going to have to recreate those here in Composer. And that's done on the Transform tab. Off to the right-hand side, the first thing we're going to do is create parent-child relationships. So all I'm doing is simply picking a child, in this case the bucket, and the parent, which is the pivot arm. And now I want to pick the pivot arm. It's the child, and attach it or make it the child of the main arm there. So that's the parent. Now the main arm is the child, and the turret is the parent. And the turret is the child, and the main base is the parent. And then we're going to do this for these little actuators as well. So the slider mechanism is the child, and the main body is the parent. And then the main body is the child, and the parent is the turret. And so we go through this process creating these parent-child relationships. Next thing we want to do is show you the orientation. If I show you one of these gizmos or these little triads, you'll see that they're oriented a certain way, and wherever they're located is, if I wanted to, let's say, rotate this main arm here, it would be wherever that pivot is located, or that little triad. So it rotates back and forth like so. Okay? Well, that's important, and when we create our linkages or our kinematic links between these guys, because we want this pivot to occur at the pivot points and not out here in space. The other thing to note is that because this main arm is the child of the turret, if I click on the turret, you'll see that its pivot is in a different orientation. The z-axis is pointing out towards the front, whereas the z-axis here is pointing out towards the side. Now that's important because the location of the pivot is related to the pivot attached to the child, but the nature of the pivot is related to the parent. So if those two things are different, it can be confusing. So you can actually have it show you the parent axis right on the child, right? So when I click those two guys, you'll see that that's different. Now, to avoid some of that confusion, what I will do is just select everything and align every pivot with the world axis up front. So now I know that all the pivots, or all the triads related to each one of these components, is pointing in the same direction. So I don't have to wonder, is the parent pointing the same direction as the child? In this case, it most certainly is. So then starts the process of moving the pivot, and we're just going to set the pivot on a line or axis. So there are tools there where we can now tell it, okay, the bucket needs to pivot, but it needs to pivot about a certain location. So we'll use the tools here to do that, and we'll say I want that to pivot about that location right there, and I need to realign it with the world axis. While I've got that selected, I'm going to come over here and tell it under Property Manager what type of kinematic link it is. In this case, it's a pivot, and it's rotating about the z-axis, which is the blue axis. I turn on my degrees of freedom. You can see a little arrow that pops in and tells you how that rotates around. Okay, so this process would continue, and I'm going to abbreviate some of this to save some time here. I'm going to come over to this guy and walk through this process, moving him around. So let's set the pivot on a line or axis. Let's just pick the center of that. Let's say we want that to be a pivot, and it should rotate about the z-axis. So we've done that, but I'm going to realign the pivot attached to this. So I'm going to align it with a line axis and have it align with the actuator itself. The parent axis is still oriented with relation to the world, so it's still rotating, pivoting about the point that I want. But what I'm going to do next is move on to the pivot attached to the slider part of the mechanism, and I can say align this pivot with a given pivot and pick its parent, and now it's aligned with the parent pivot. And then I can say this is a linear pivot and moves along the z direction. Okay, and when I'm ready, I can then say show me the motion that I've now defined. So if I grab that actuator, I can see that it's going to allow it to slide back and forth and also rotate about that pivot, which is exactly what I want. Another thing to note here too is that a parent can have two children, but a child cannot have two parents. So I can't attach this slider as a child to the main arm here as a second parent. So we'll have to deal with that individually as we go. So you want to make sure that you capture this with a view, because all the kinematic information is going to be stored in the view. So if you forget to create the view, you're going to lose all of your kinematic information. So let's fast forward here. Just running low on time, so I'm going to show you where I've got all the views created and dropped. Okay, so let's open that up. And so the dropping is the same process that we saw with WAL-E. And here we're going to hit the play button and see that as we reposition each one of those views in sort of a manual way, when we drag and drop that into the animation, it's going to interpolate in between those. So I created a view here called up, and then I created another view halfway, right? So I would reposition everything and create a static view of this, and then I'll be able to move forward. And then as I drag and drop those into my timeline, it's going to interpolate that motion. Okay. And then again, running short on time here, so I'm going to open up the end and just show you the where I created the cameras and show you a little bit of what that looks like. So here's the end, and then I'll back up and show you how to create those cameras. So we created a walkthrough. The top, because you didn't get to see this at the beginning, the top will be the walkthrough, so we're going to have multiple panes shown here. And the bottom two will be static views. So we're going to walk around the excavator and simulate that we're getting into the cab. And the camera on the top view is always looking at the bucket. So, and it's always attached to the turret. So if the turret moves, it rotates, then the camera will move right along with it. So as we play this, you'll see as if you were inside the cab, watching as the operator might watch through the glass. And then the bottom two views are showing you an outside perspective. So what exactly are we doing here? We're showing, we're scooping something up, we're rotating around 45 degrees, and we're dumping it back out just like an excavator would.